I hope you are well and that your family. In this episode, we will discover two cases. One will end in France and the other in Algeria. Stay well attentive until the end, because you are going to be revolted by what you are going to see. The two cases that we are going to see are very few, and it was important to me to tell you about them, not to forget and to honor the memory of the victims. So without further ado, turn off your light, settle in well, and let yourself be carried away by my voice. On March 3, 1990, little Chinese Daoud was born in Rouba in a small Algerian countryside, described by her relatives as discreet and smiling, the little one within a large family of 7 children. Life is not easy every day, but the family sticks together, and they can really count on each other. Veritable ray of sunshine takes her passion for handball, which she practices regularly. Once an adult, the young woman meets love. The 2 children are born from this union. There is very little information about this marriage. What we know is that fate is hitting the young family violently because a priori his wife died in a fire. Although overwhelmed by this disastrous fate, the young woman does not let herself down and takes back her life in hand over time. She knows that her 2 children need her and that she must remain strong in order to be determined to offer the best possible life to her family. She will give everything for her children. Even if it means sacrificing her life, she loved them dearly. In 2015, he was introduced to a certain Mounir Bouta, an Algerian just divorced and father of 3 children. He had obtained French citizenship when her first husband falls under the spell of Mounir and decides to follow him to France, and shortly after she accepts his marriage proposal. The daughter from China follows her mother on this new adventure, while her eldest son stays to live with his grandparents near Algiers. Again, the details of this situation are not very clear. In Revon, we know that in all his life revolved around his children, he experiences this separation very badly. Despite everything, the young woman remains hopeful that the family can be reunited in full in the near future. She is convinced that after the hardships she has already gone through, the future holds beautiful surprises for her. Precisely, the young mother of were mistaken. It was a much too bitter future that loomed before her. On the other side of the Mediterranean, the young family grows with the arrival of a new child in September 208. The couple decides to settle in a small pavilion in Mérignac, a town in the southwest of France. Quickly, Finesse agrees with several of his neighbors. He described her as a sweet, friendly, and sunny person. A neighbor will even specify the following things. She was cheerful. She laughed all the time at the slightest unimportant little sentence. She burst out laughing. She was a mama hen. She took good care of her children. She was a very good mom. You're a ray of sunshine. The young woman is very involved in the schooling of her children. She accompanies them all the time to the municipal school support. On the surface, the little family seems perfect, nothing to say. The dad plays with his children in the garden, and the mom walks with them around the neighborhood. Everything seemed normal and quiet. Nothing to say at first, as I said. Yet appearances are deceptive. In family intimacy, Mounir is a real bully with Cheney. He can't stand the fact that the young woman can have projects such as working or passing her driver's license. The man wants to control absolutely everything and believes that his wife's place is at home. that her position was there to clean up and take care of her children. Nothing more, changing jobs frequently, the macho is very focused on drinking and finds himself convicted a dozen times for drunk driving, extremely jealous. Munir gradually makes Shaynage's daily life unbearable. The man manipulates the young woman and makes her believe that without him, she will never be able to bring her 13-year-old eldest son, who has remained in Algeria. When you look at all this, it's really sad. How can you do that to the woman you're supposed to love? Playing with a mother's love to get his way, it shows us how vicious and manipulative he was. The master Soline Requin Bardet will later confide that she was so caught up in the idea that if she did not stay with this man, she would not be able to see her eldest son return to French territory. He had put it in her head so much that for her, it was the supreme goal. She could suffer all possible violence. She was indeed staying with this man her child had not returned from Algeria. The violence suffered is not only psychological, but also physical. Munir there fiercely over and over again. In June 2020, the horror that takes place behind the walls of the house is revealed in the open. While he is on the sidewalk in front of their home, the man said to be of years old tries to strangle his wife in front of everyone. The attack is so violent that Chanel suffers from a crushed larynx. Without the intervention of the neighborhood, the young mother of 3 children would have lost her life that day. Munir is immediately arrested and brought to court without delay. He received an 18-month prison sentence, 9 months of which were suspended on probation for 2 years. Wait. He almost strangled her live and they will release so easily fuck off in the wild. It's completely crazy. On top of that, he hasn't even been warned of his exit to France after this appalling and intolerable incident. The robbery breaks out and begins to distance himself. The young woman wishes to free herself from the grip of her husband and wants to get him out of her life permanently. But his tormentor leaves free after only 5 months of detention, and he continues to blackmail him vis-à-vis justice to stay in Algeria. For this reason, Chinese is unable to completely cut ties with him. In addition, despite an obligation to stay at a distance from his victim, the man watches her and follows her with his van. He also harasses her by phone so that she files a new complaint. While they are divorcing, Munir regularly conducts scouting to find out the slightest facts and Chinese. In March 2021, the mother of the family is finally reunited with her big boy. She finally feels happy and regains hope. However, a few days after the reunion, the 33-year-old young woman once again files a complaint against Munir with the Marignac police station. The latter assaulted him. In a supermarket parking lot before sequestering her and shooting her for several hours. Despite the filing of a complaint, the Departmental University of Family Protection has not followed anything, and the man's vehicle is not geolocated. A few weeks later, on May 4th, 2021, after months of harassment and several attacks, the fate of suddenly rocking around 8:15 a.m. is preparing to leave her home to pick up her children from daycare. She puts on her shoes, walks through the door, and she finds herself ambushed by her ex-spouse. The bully holds a rifle in his hands and points the gun at the young woman will shoot twice in the legs of the latter. There she has no chance, and she cannot react to this terrible attack. A neighbor of Chinese is immediately alerted by the detonations. He rushes to the pavilion of the mother of the family. He opens the portal and finds himself face to face with Munir, weapon in hand, threatening him, stands over and has just poured a liquid on his victim, gasoline. The neighbor will describe the scene to the press. I saw this guy who was dumping his can on her. I understood immediately what was going to happen. I ran at him screaming, but it was too late. Munir, his victim, he lights his lighter while kissing. The amount of gasoline poured so impressive that even the young woman's house is consumed by flames, although he tries to help his neighbor is powerless and fails to extinguish the blaze. It is with immense heartbreak that he will tell all these atrocities, according to his words, that did not immediately succumb to his wounds. He seemed to be begging for help before he died. A few minutes after the femicide of his ex-wife, Munir Bhutta, aged 44, is arrested by the police. Then he will be indicted for voluntary homicide on spouse. The prosecutor of Bordeaux quickly reveals the firsts of the man. Convinced that it is said that his wife had a lover and that she manipulated him, he would have decided to punish her for the suffering endured and wanted to, I quote, burn his wife a little to leave marks on her without wishing to kill her, crush her in solitary confinement. Munir Bhutta manages to set fire to the refrigerator in his cell, and he attacks the prison guard. The family of is wiped out. No one understands that such an act could have taken place. In July 2021, the young woman's parents obtained a French residence permit in order to be closer to their grandchildren while they were placed in foster care. Finally, from the 2021 rooms, they get the war of the 3 children. They are through the mobilization of associations that raise funds to facilitate their development. There we can say that this is the only light in this darkness to be made. At least the children are not separated and will be able to grow up, surround with love. We are thinking hard of them and sending them all our support. The day after the tragedy, 400 people gather in front of the city's home. They are there to show their support and their anger at this unjust femicide. Public opinion is outraged. How could this murder have happened when the victim had dared to speak out and denounce her attacker several times? Why didn't Chinese have a big danger phone? FYI, this is a small device to give to people who are victims of domestic violence. That way you just have to press a button and you have the helpers who come to your aid. There are too many questions to ask here. Why had no rapprochement bracelet been placed on Munir to prevent him from approaching, and how come this ex-convict had access to a gun? It is totally absurd and disgusting that no measures have been taken to find answers and check if there has been a malfunction of the police or the justice system. The Ministry of the Interior triggers an inspection mission in July 2021. The general public learns that the Marignac police officer who had registered Shin's last complaint had himself been convicted of domestic violence the same year. Moreover, the revelations do not end there. On March 29, 2020, that is to say a few days after this last complaint, and when she was supposed to be wanted by the law enforcement agencies, Munir had presented himself on his own initiative at the reception desk of the Marignac police station to complain about the custody of his children. According to him, he didn't see enough of them. The same agent who had registered the complaint from China sent him back without even looking at his identity. The guy didn't even check his fucking identity. This is where you see that sometimes justice is complicated. It is desired. Julian Pluto, the lawyer of the Daoud family, is indignant. we consider that the most serious shortcomings are not mainly at the level of the collection of Shines Dawood's complaint, but rather at the level of the investigation follow-up, which has been totally deficient with an inexplicable inaccuracy from the moment when the facts denounced by Shahnaz Dawood will be confirmed. For her part, Soline declares, I regret that someone convicted by the correctional court with an addiction problem, according to the press, remains in direct contact with the public and can continue to receive complaints. This reinforces me in the idea that it is essential to have in each police station and each gendarmerie a referent or a cell that is finally in 2022, the Director of Public Security of the Southwest receives a blame. 7 of its officials, including the famous policeman, are summoned before a disciplinary council. The sanctions imposed range from a warning to a suspended exclusion. First of all, stay well until the end, because the second case will begin. But anyway, back to the topic, I don't necessarily know much about it, but I have the impression that it's super light. I'm really disgusted for this whole affair and everything that comes out of it. We have a destiny that has just been fucking broken. A woman who just wanted to live and be happy with her children. A woman who has not been listened to. We just put it aside there without saying anything. And unfortunately, all this will very much end up suffering atrocities. What does this story do is so much pain, and that she can rest in peace. As we live in my house, I swear to you, this kind of injustice is driving me crazy. In any case, I am waiting for your opinions in comments. Now it's time to move on to the second story, and this one is just as horrible. So without further ado, immersion. Here we are this time in 2021, on board the Baghi Mokhtar in southern Algeria, near the border with Mali. In this region of the extreme Sahara, the nights can be sweltering with temperatures that approach 50 degrees. It is therefore not uncommon to see locals sleeping under the stars to enjoy some fresh air. This is the case of the teachers of the school number 10 of the municipality. The 9 young women aged between 25 and 30 share a small office accommodation located inside their school. When the heat becomes too pressing, the tenants of this 90 square meters, without air conditioning, have their mattresses on the floor of the courtyard and together in the fresh air. It may seem surprising if we come to France, but it is rather common in countries where temperatures are extreme. And personally, it reminds me of when I was sleeping at my grandfather's house in Algeria, on the roof, under the stars. On the other hand, in the morning, the scorching sun that hit me in the face. Hey, I can tell you that. You're tough. But hey, they were great memories. In short, passionate about their profession, their vocation is to transmit values to their students. Although the 9 teachers sometimes feel a little cramped, especially since one of them is the mother of a 2-year-old baby. Overall, she gets along well and community life is rather peaceful. All spring 2021, a climate of stress in the school. For several weeks, the teachers have been subjected to verbal and physical attacks. They are insulted and threatened, vandalism, burglary, violence over the days. The harassment intensifies. None of the 9 young women really understands the reasons for the criminal acts. They do not have much means, live in modest conditions, and they have a tidy life. So why do individuals attack them in this way? The teachers end up communicating their concerns to their superiors. They insist on the lack of security in the establishment, but no measures are taken. Young women are disappointed by the inaction of their superior. They hope without believing too much that calm will return by itself. The poor are far from suspecting the horror that awaits them. On the night of Monday, May 17, 2021, 4 individuals are stationed outside the school, while a group of attackers aged between 25 and 50 years old break into the premises of the establishment around 2:30 a.m., while the 9 teachers are sleeping soundly. A noise brings blood to the silence that reigned until then and wake them up with a start. Completely disoriented and panicked, the young women do not have time to react. Men armed with knives and sabers have just erupted in their small function housing. Some hide their faces with the help of a typical scarf that desert men wear to protect themselves from dust and sunburn. In the first minutes, the executioners jostle and brutalize the victims. The teachers are out of their beds and grouped in the group. Those who resist are violently beaten. 2 of them even hug her arms and face. The young mother, her child with all her might. One of the attackers manages to tear his arms away. The man slips a knife under the baby's throat and threatens the teachers to slit her throat in front of their eyes. An obedience, not at their orders. The 9 women are desperate and have no choice but to follow the instructions. Monstrous beasts that hold them captive for several each teacher is brought in turn. They are directed to rooms where some of the accomplices are waiting for them. The attacks follow one after the other, and the physical and psychological pleas are endless. Finally, the diehards flee, taking computers, phone, and money with them. The 9 teachers are traumatized and stunned because they have just suffered, but at least they are still alive. I must admit that when I discovered this tragedy, I was really relieved that they all made it out alive, but what they suffered, they will never forget, unfortunately. Once again, I send a lot of love to these women, to these fighters. After what they have gone through, I wish them only good things in the future. One of them comes out of her torpor and gets her hands on a well-hidden phone. She calls for help, and around 4 a.m., everyone is evacuated from here on Tuesday, May 8th, 2021. The 9 young women and the 2-year-old child are evacuated by special plane to the Ardart Hospital. This hospital You are more or less in the center of Algeria. Once they arrive, they are placed in a wing away from the other patients. The victims are immediately examined by a doctor and 2 psychologists. Mohammed, a colleague of the victims, a member of the National Union of Education Workers, testifies with emotion to the press. They have lived 2 hours of horror that will mark them ourselves. We are unable to resume classes. We cannot forget these images of bloody walls and floors, nor forgive ourselves for not protecting our colleagues. Mohammed also recalls the intolerable indifference that his colleagues had to face when they tried to alert their hierarchy. We have been living in a situation of total insecurity for 3 years now, where attacks have become a daily occurrence. We have asked the authorities for help. A month later, still nothing. Then the authorities had reacted in time by ensuring the safety of the teachers. The 9 teachers would not have lived through this night of horror. What happened to them is extremely serious and unforgivable. The perpetrators must be arrested, tried, and the Algerian families remain speechless in front of these horror images. These mutilated and bloodied teachers who leave the building distraught. It's simply not normal. Some are plunged into a state of shock at home and a deep silence. Others are seized by violent hysterical attacks. Everyone is wondering who dared to desecrate a school. This place filled with wisdom and knowledge. Who dared to lay hands on his 9 precious messengers of this knowledge? Why such acts? These women have dedicated their lives to doing good around them and taking care of future generations. They help to build a better future. So how can we be serious? What kind of a sick person you have to be? That's nonsense. A lot of questions that will remain unanswered. Moreover, what exactly happened behind the door of this room on the night of May 17 to 18, 2021, only a handful of individuals do. This survivor does not dare to talk, and how to blame them? The last time they dared to take we refused to believe them. One of the 9 teachers pronounces these few words. Do you think a thief would stay in a row for 2 hours? They lined us up, and each time took one of us alone to the room. They didn't come to steal. Meaningful words that express the terrible violence they have suffered. After visiting the hospital, a precise acquaintance, they are treated well by the medical staff, but remain almost silent about the circumstances of the tragedy. The doctors forbid us to discuss with them the sexual assaults they suffered that night. Beyond the risk of worsening their state of trauma by evoking their heartbreaking memory, another region explains this heavy silence. In these particularly conservative regions, women carry the weight of the famous family honor on their shoulders. Because of this, rape is a taboo subject. Victims of sexual assault are considered impure, even guilty in the eyes of too many. Unfortunately, this absence of any form of care or support does not allow the victims to rebuild. They are isolated and left to themselves in this inhuman ordeal. They end up developing deep feelings of guilt and shame. And then, we must also not forget that speaking out and revealing the truth also means taking the risk of reprisals. It is not uncommon for the one who dares to denounce their rapists and file a complaint to then be attacked out of revenge, either by the culprit or by the latter's family or friends. In some cases, it is downright the relatives of the victim who attack the latter. One more question of honor, you realize. You are suffering a traumatic assault. You find the strength to tell your story, and behind you, you are full of it. With everything we are doing today on post-traumatic stress disorder and the devastating impact that sexual assault has on the long term, how can we still act like this? We are not talking about a bad time spent here. We are talking about a drama that will impact them until the end of their lives. So the teachers shut up. Moreover, the official press releases as well as many media avoid clearly mentioning the attacks committed during this terrible night. On the other hand, the international press tends to focus on sexual crimes precisely to denounce barbarism, which resists gender inequalities. This perfectly reflects the omerta that reigns in this part of Algeria. It is for these same reasons that the names of the victims have not been disclosed to the press, and I chose to respect that and not look for them. And I'm sorry if it makes the case less precise in the video, but I don't want to offend or hurt these women in any way. Behind every N, there are real human beings, and we must always keep that in mind. When we watch a Christmas video, sometimes we are so inspired by the plot that we can quickly forget that it's not just a story told by a YouTuber to entertain us. Well, entertain is not the right word, but we understand each other. Once the video is over, we resume the course of our lives. But beyond YouTube, somewhere in the real world, there are lives that are broken and forever. There are families in mourning, torn apart and devastated, people who never recover from such tragedies, who are scarred for life, unfortunately. So it is our duty to respect the victims and their loved ones, and in this case, it is by preserving their anonymity. Anyway, let's get back to it. On May 9th, 21, The prosecutor's office 950 kilometers north announces the arrest of 2 suspects. Subsequently, this additional alleged perpetrator is also arrested among the 9 SP. Only 4 confess to their crime. Finally, the authorities charge 5 of them. In addition, the prosecutor general, the deputy of the court Mahmoud Boulkeba, claims that the authorities have got their hands on some of the stolen objects. This is the general outrage. In a statement, the National Council for Human Rights strongly condemns this savage aggression. A shocking and inhuman incident that has nothing to do with morality, against educators who have chosen to leave their families to fulfill their duties towards our children. Mohamed Wajau, the Minister of Education, promises the application of a sentence commensurate with this abject crime. Anyone involved in the infamous assault on innocent female teachers will receive the punishment they deserve. Teachers in the region are going on strike to show their support for the victims and protest against the lack of concrete measures. The unions of education workers threaten to extend the strike to other regions if the security of the establishments is not reinforced as soon as possible. According to El Watan, an Algerian media outlet, almost 100 terrified teachers are fleeing the city and surroundings in the days following this night of horror. In March 2022, the 5 men are sentenced to 20 years of criminal imprisonment for forming a gang of criminals, assaults and robberies with premeditation and use of white herbs by the Court of Abraham. I confess to you that I don't know if they were also convicted for the acts of sexual assault. Either was kept secret or there were no charges on it. The training does not appear in the most recent articles. A priori, a large part of the population considered this sentence of 20 years in prison firm too light vis-a-vis the unforgivable acts that were committed. While the horror caused by this drama is still vivid, Algeria is upset by an attempt at femicide. So ends this episode with 2 such sad cases. Again, we have poor people who are victims of violence, and unfortunately, in the first case, she will lose her life. It was important to me to talk about these stories because, unfortunately, they are too abandoned, and the media talk about them very little, if at all. By the way, this is a rather interesting question that I am going to ask you. Have you ever heard of at least one of these 2 cases? I am curious, and I am waiting for your answers. And also, give me your opinions regarding these 2 stories. I look forward to reading you. Thanks to you for watching this video and for always being more and more numerous.